Dave Greenwood, how goes it?
How are you, sir? Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for coming on. Do you know
Yeah,
that you're the first person I ever did a podcast with? And I want to say it was probably 6 years ago.
really?
You invited me to do one. I don't know when it was. It's got to be 2017, 2018. But anyways, it was the first time I ever did it. And I appreciate that. So all these years
Well,
later, you're on mine. So I look forward to it.
well, you are a skilled master podcaster now, so
I don't know about that. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So you've written two books. You're the author of two books. One is called Overcoming Distractions, which is actually I read that before our first podcast. And then your more
Mhm.
recent book is called Overcoming Burnout. You got a background in marketing. Today's conversation is going to be more around the burnout piece. But before we get into it, Dave, anything that you want to comment on before we slide into the conversation?
No, I think just one thing that you and I can focus on, and we can get into this. I see a lot of social media posts about burnout, and sometimes it's very simplistic. Work less, drink a bottle of water. Go to yoga class. But I think what we can get into is that this issue is far more complex and different for everybody. And that's the way I've tried to kind of attack this. So I think it's important for people to understand that, oh, just because I got free pizza on Fridays and my boss let me go at noon, whoa, I'm not burnt out anymore. So it's just really it's critical that people understand this.
You grew up as a child who battled ADHD. Battled is probably a strong word. I don't know if you'd classify it that way, but did that have any part in you ultimately getting to this place in your life where you were more conscious of burnout, ADHD?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I work with many people who are, busy professionals, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs with ADHD, but many of them also come to me to work one-on-one because they are in fact feeling burned out. And then yeah, ADHD is a big factor because of the way we manage our time, manage our emotions, procrastinate, miss deadlines, all those things. I mean, the list goes on. But so some people I work with have ADHD, some people are burned out, some people are feeling both. It's definitely a contributor to feeling that way. Absolutely.
How would you define burnout? What exactly is it? And where does it come from? Those two things. What is it? Where does it come from?
Well, there are some simple explanations of the feelings. Like you're physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, you feel resentful, those types of things. Many people feel cynical. So if you're, for example, if you have a coworker that is just always thinking of the negatives, day after day after day, maybe they're not so much a negative person, maybe they're feeling burned out. So but those are kind of the clear signs, is that physical mental exhaustion, the cynicism about everything, and then the resentment of others. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your clients. Those are kind of the three indicators. But I mean, there's even more that comes with it, with the signs of burnout, the physical signs, the headaches, the grinding the teeth, the digestive issues, the my neck is always, thrown out, or it's just these kind of almost, for some people, unexplained physical symptoms that could be a result of feeling burned out and your body's just responding. There's a great book. I will not attempt to pronounce the author's name, but you can find the book. It's The Body Keeps the Score. And it's written by a psychiatrist who worked in the VA hospital in Boston years ago after the Vietnam War, and dealt with trauma specifically with people. And he researched the physical symptoms that people who experienced trauma felt. And it is such an accurate title for a book, The Body Keeps the Score, because many people who feel burned out, like I said, have all these physical symptoms. They go to doctors, they go through tests. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with you, which is a tragedy in itself, because they should be more aware of burnout to begin with. But again, we can discuss that. And it's a hard read, but it really does go to show you how your body responds to trauma, and burnout is trauma when you get right down to it. I interviewed one guy for my book who had a heart attack. He was so burnt out. He was a healthcare executive. He was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he got so burnt out that he had a heart attack. But but yeah, other people I worked with on the book had severe digestive issues. They went to the best hospitals in the country. They went through tests. They said nothing was wrong with them. Then when they began to figure out the kind of cycle of burnout they were in, things started to get better. They started to figure things out. But yeah, I mean, I wrote the book not to scare people in the way I did, but to show people that if you don't take care of this, you can end up on the operating table.
Where do you think it starts, though, Dave? I mean, typically, I know it's different for everybody. I totally get that. But what have you observed with the people that you've worked? Do they typically have some sort of trauma that they've suppressed, and as a result of that, signs of the stresses come out in the body? Or is it they may not have experienced that type of trauma, say war or disease, for example, or death? Maybe they haven't experienced that, but maybe they're thinking that they have to be something, whatever, to please other people. They have to have a title at work. They have to look a certain way, and as a result of trying to maintain an image. Is that where it comes from? Or I know it could be both, but what have you observed?
You're right. I mean, people pleasers burn out because they don't want to say no. So they typically will say yes to everything. They'll say yes to working late. They'll say yes to their boss piling more work on them. They will say yes when they really do mean no because they think somebody's not going to like them. So, I mean, there's a whole nother hour probably on people pleasing you could do. Okay, but that's a big part of it, proving ourselves. Many people feel they have to prove themselves. I found that in a lot of women because there was a little bit of a dynamic. I'll be careful, but a dynamic between men and women in the workplace. So there were only two men that I interviewed for the book. Not to say that men don't burn out, but I think men were less apt to actually come forward and talk about it. But a lot of women felt that they had to prove themselves. Incidentally, I had two wedding planners, and they both just crashed and burned because the hours were ridiculous. One woman I think was planning like 100 weddings in a season or something like that. It was just like, so you're working during the week, and then you got to be there on the weekends for the wedding and all this stuff. So the hours are certainly a factor in it. Workload, again, poor time management, whether you're ADHD or not, that comes into play. If you're not managing your time properly, then that is going to erode at your mental health over time. Lack of clarity as well. I think there's one thing I work with when I work with adults with ADHD is that we focus a lot on gaining clarity. Everything from, did you get everything from that meeting with your boss, to did you get exactly what your client wanted, to, et cetera. And when people don't have lack of clarity, then they begin to spin themselves in this little bit of a cycle. They don't get started on projects, then they get behind, and then they're up against the wall where the deadline's tomorrow and they haven't even started the project, and so on. And when you repeatedly do that, week after week, month after month, you're going to feel burned out. I think the other thing that this is complex. What are you bringing into the workplace? Are you a caregiver? Are you, do you have children? Do you have maybe children with special needs? Are you of the age where you're caring for an aging parent? Those types of things. HR people, leadership, people in the C-suite need to understand that if you're seeing people that exhibit certain behaviors, they're tired, they're cynical, they're not getting stuff done, they may already be spent before they even got to you in the morning. So those need to be taken into consideration as well.
So many interesting things there. How much of it is the person just falling into a habit they're not even aware of?
I thought I was really good at managing my time because of this work with people with ADHD. And before I wrote Overcoming Burnout, I actually realized that I could manage my time much better. So I thought I was pretty good at it. But people who, just plug meetings in everywhere, wherever they can. They don't, maybe their calendar is open to other people to plugging in meetings. They have a big project and they only have 30 minutes at the end of the day to do it. So then they get home from the office at 9 o'clock at night, those types of things. And they may not even realize they're doing it. It's just maybe the way that they've come to work. I've worked with people who are in leadership where they have this open door policy, we used to call it. Well, my employees come in all day and ask me questions, and I still got my work to do. Yeah, how's that working out for you? So at some point, you got to shut your door. You got to say, you know what? I'm not available from X to X, or I'm not available on these days, or those types of things. So those are the strategies that people can work on. But yeah, they might not even realize it. To your point.
Yeah, I would say that. I think about myself when I first got into sales 25 years ago. If somebody wanted to meet with me, I was going to meet with them. It didn't matter. If somebody wanted to network with me, I was going to network with them. It didn't matter. I had no qualifications for the person. It's like, if you're a human being, I'll meet with you. And that went on for a long time because I had to build, consciously, I had to build a network of people. And then the more people I spoke to and the more people I met over the years, the easier it was to figure out who's worth meeting and who's not to discredit any person in particular. But you can tell when you're with somebody who probably isn't the best use of your time. And I look at my schedule today, and I'm very routine, but I'm very jealous of my time. I'm not just going to go meet with you because you want to have coffee for the hell of it. I need to understand, like, where's the value in it for both of us? And I don't mean money value. I just mean, is this the best way for you and I to spend our time? Is it worth it for me to leave my office to go see you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends where you are in your career. Like you say, salespeople, there's got to be probably some flexibility. That's when I talk to people, it's just like, you got to be reasonable about this too. So if you have I don't meet with anybody on these days, and then all of a sudden you got a possible $1 million account and somebody can only meet with you, then
I don't have time. I don't have time for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so no, that's my day to dust my desk, or vacuum my office. There's got to be some reality
Yeah.
involved in that, but to the extent where you can control your environment and your time and be able to get your stuff done, then that needs to happen. But again, you've got to have some flexibility, and maybe we call them parameters for breaking that. So like I said, if this, I've been hounding this guy for 2 years, and all of a sudden he wants to meet with me on Wednesday, and that's my day to whatever. Well, you know what, I'm going to have to make that decision.
That's the key phrase. You're going to have to make the decision. Still your choice, and it's a conscious thing, which I think is the key there. What are we compromising that we shouldn't compromise, or people in general, when it comes to just, I'll make myself available to you because now you're ready, or now you're interested, so therefore I'm going to just drop what I'm doing. We're going to be careful of that too, right? And so is there anything that we should not negotiate? So that I'm not going to negotiate this on my end, because ultimately if I just give up my, let's just say, time to you, should I not eat breakfast? Should I sleep less? Should I not, exercise today because you want to meet at 6? I'm just curious, like, is there anything that you wouldn't negotiate?
Yeah, I would say that's self-care. I mean, I think that term's overused, but people understand it. But yeah, the exercise, the eating properly, the sleep, those types of things, family time. I work with people in other countries where I may be meeting with them in the morning and they're going home at 8 o'clock at night. That is going to catch up with you. It's going to wear down your body. It's going to wear down your capacity for, regulating emotions and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, sleep, exercise, some type of mindfulness, and that term is, people's view of it is different, but mindfulness can be just sitting in a room for 10 minutes quiet, or it can be taking a 20-minute walk around the block or something like that. I interviewed a guy from Australia, Giovanni Dietzman, who teaches meditation, and he has a phrase, never zero. Even if it's like 5 minutes of meditation at 3 in the afternoon, whatever, you got it in, but you found time to make it.
That's interesting. On one level, I find that those that are burnt out, and I'm being very general here, but those that are burnt out tend to resent whatever it is that they attribute to burning them out: the job, the boss, the spouse, the parent, whatever they're giving their time to in exchange for what, maybe what they don't feel like the return is equal to the investment. And so and then the space in between gets filled with resentment often. And as an outside observer, I get angry at that, because it's obvious that that person or those people, they don't realize they have a say in it. So I become almost resentful at their inability to get off the treadmill. And then they're resenting the person that's not giving them what they think they want or need in exchange for their effort or their caring or whatever. What's your take on that?
I think sometimes you can't. I was on a panel a week or two ago with some human resources professionals about mental health. And one person on the panel said he was on a 3-month sabbatical because he spent the last 10 years taking care of his mother. You can't walk away from your parents or your children or those responsibilities. So was there resentment? I don't know, but a lot of people do feel resentment because they're taking care of somebody else and they're missing maybe the Saturday night with their friends or other things that they could be enjoying because they're taking care of somebody else. I saw this at Special Olympics when I worked at Special Olympics, where we really tried hard to get the families involved. We took the effort to create family committees and family events during, say, summer games during the weekend and down at Harvard University, thousands of Special Olympics athletes. And we got minimal results from families. And what we figured out very quickly is that, you're taking care of, a son or a daughter with a disability, and then you've got a coach and other people that are going to watch your kid for 3 days. Guess what? You're out of here. You're going to a hotel room or something. You're going to go chill out. So I think we need to understand that dynamic as well. I think in the workplace, there's probably a little more room for working that out. Maybe you resent your boss for continuing to drop piles of work on your desk at 4:30 in the afternoon or things like that. And that's where that internal communication needs to improve.
Yeah, and I still think, and I have personal experience with some of what you're saying, where there is no option that you helping somebody else is like a mandatory thing. It doesn't negate that you should take care of yourself, though. It doesn't negate that you need some of your own time, or that you need to rest or eat well or just get out for a walk. It doesn't negate that. So there are times where you might want to ask for help, or you might want to put it out there and say, hey, could I get a half hour just to be alone? And I don't see that happen a lot, at least in my experiences, where when somebody's buried mentally based on their responsibilities to, say, somebody else, whether it's a loved one or a boss, for example, there are times where you have to say something.
Well, the other thing you need to do, which is what I've done, because I have a father who's requiring a good amount of my time. He doesn't drive anymore. He's had some health issues. Is back, a few years ago, where there was this doctor's appointment and that doctor's appointment, and they were getting booked here and there. And, there's a 10:30 doctor's appointment in Boston. And yeah, I do work for myself, but those situations ended up having me basically out for the entire day. By the time I get him in the car, get him to Boston, park my car, do blah, 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 I get back and I'm spent. So one of the very simple things I did was, all right, time out. I need to take control of the situation. I cannot respond to these things anymore. So no more doctor's appointments are going to be scheduled unless I do it. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to schedule them, and I'm going to ask for the last appointment of the day. I'm going to ask for it on a day that works for me, because it does cause a chain reaction. So for example, you and I work with a lot of people individually. So if I got to rework a day, I might have to cancel 4 or 5 things, and then shift them around. So one of the very simple things people can do, maybe it's simply said, but maybe not simply executed, is you have to have if you're in the situation that we described, you have to be in control. There's no other way. You can't let the situation you're in control you. You can't constantly be in response mode. And as my friend Diane says, the stop, drop, and roll, that gets tiring very quickly. So one of the things I advise people to do is sit down, see what's destroying your week or your flow or causing you to just drop everything, and find a way to take control of it.
Yeah, when my mom was alive, she had cancer. She got through it, and then she got it again, and she died a few months later. She just didn't want to fight it anymore. But when she first got it, my siblings and I all jumped in to help. So, but I remember, I do a lot of one-to-one coaching. And I remember the days where I would have to take my mom to chemo, or I would take my mom to radiation. I would sit in the parking lot and do my calls from the car with my notebook, and my mom would go in for her appointment, and I'd go in and get her and bring her back. But the thing I realized was I could do both. I could serve my clients and take care of my mom during that window, and everybody was okay with it. But had I not said anything, if I don't do the work, and it's probably like you too, Dave, if you're not there to do the work, your clients aren't going to pay you anything. It's not like someone else is going to do it for you.
Right.
We'll say this, my clients were fantastic. They understood. I didn't spend the time on the calls telling them about my mom being sick. The time was spent, they didn't even know. I would just say, I'm in the car today. I wouldn't say my mom's getting radiation or my mom's going through chemo. So most of the time, 9 out of 10 of them didn't know anything. And I felt fine with it, because I had made the choice to do it in that way. So I can relate on your dad, and my dad, without getting into all the details, he's going through a lot of that stuff too, and it's on a personal level. So he's got to manage that. Anyways, we don't have to get into all the detail there. What I'm interested though is, and there's so many directions we could take this conversation, and if I go too far afield, stop me. But to what extent do you talk to your clients about brain chemistry as it relates to what they can do to potentially manage their burnout or whatever it is that's tinkering with them? Do you get involved? Do you talk to them at all about hormone release and the things you can do to control, to some extent, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and to what extent does that potentially help them get back on a track that's more livable, for lack of a better word?
I mean, I like to say, and again, on the majority of the people I work with one-on-one are busy professionals with ADHD. Some of them are feeling some of the effects of burnout, but I'm also careful to tell them that I'm not a doctor and I'm not even a therapist. What I work with people on is the mechanics of ADHD and burnout. So am I an expert in all the chemicals? No. One of the neurotransmitters that, was the 800-pound gorilla in the room for ADHD is dopamine. And there are some very simple ways to generate that. And it's the exercise, it's the going for a walk, it's the quick little, you could go downstairs and hop in the rowing machine for 5 minutes. Those types of things. What is fascinating to me is that the number of people I've worked with who couldn't even take a simple 20-minute walk. I'm like, so when we get started, I'm like, so when was the last time you took a walk? Oh, I have no idea. Could you take a walk this afternoon? Maybe take a break. Yeah, maybe I could do that. I mean, it's astounding that some of the, you think walking. Well, we walk all the time. We get up from our desk, we walk. You can walk. So those are the kind of the simple things. I know personally, those things have been a game changer for me. You and I are recording this in the fall/winter. If it's not 10 below zero out, I like to take a nice 20-30 minute walk when it's cold out, because the cold air in my face wakes me up. That is almost a proven technique for just getting a little bit of a dopamine hit, is getting that cold air in your face, those types of things. But yeah, it's go join a gym for $10 a month, go to a yoga class, go for a run. If the gym's too far away from your house, then go to a plan B, go buy an exercise bike, put it in the basement, go on Spotify and grab a 5-minute guided meditation. Those types of things are just easy wins for yourself.
Well, yeah, and I've had people say to me, people in my life say, don't get too into the exercise conversation because it offends people who don't feel good about themselves, or not everybody wants to get up and walk. Not everybody wants to work out. Yeah, that's true. Fine. But so let's even take exercise. Now I'm obsessed with it, to be candid with you. I love the idea of activity, but it's just not everybody's thing. But the dopamine for me is the small win. You had referenced that a couple seconds ago when you were talking. It's the choice to walk, or it's the choice to, it could be as simple as, if you even remove exercise, you can get a dopamine hit by somebody responding to your text, or somebody saying thank you.
Mhm.
Just to be acknowledged by another person provides a dopamine hit, or just to be recognized by somebody else provides somebody with a dopamine hit. If it were exercise, for example, if you walked a mile a day and you did that for like a month, and then in month 2 you started going 2 miles per day and you saw the speed difference in your mile, that's a dopamine hit. It's the feeling of accomplishment. It's reaching a destination that you didn't expect, for example, or an acknowledgement. And I think those things are simple. You don't have to be wealthy to join a gym, or to get the dopamine hit. You can just walk around your office if you wanted. You could do planking in your office. You could say thank you
Mhm.
to somebody. There's so many ways to do that.
It's a lot of times where I just, between meetings, I'll just go outside for 5 minutes and just get some cold air in my face. It's a jolt. And there's a podcast out with the Huberman Lab, if you've ever listened
Yeah.
to as Andrew Huberman, but and it's 2.5 hours, but he literally dissects dopamine. But one of the things he says is, if you're just sitting there and you're, say you got to write a report for your boss or something like that, you're just not getting into it, or whatever the task at hand is that you're not getting started on, is that he says you've got to do something that's more drastic than the thing you actually have to do. And it's not like physical harm or anything like that. It's just like you've got to like overshoot the thing you have to do. And some of that is, like you said, he talks about a cold shower or things like that. But and it's interesting. I've been throwing cold water in my face for years, and then I heard this just like 2 weeks ago, and it's like, oh, I guess I knew what I was doing all along. But it just shocks your system a little bit. You know, those are all fine, but there are so many other pieces of burnout that need to be addressed. Maybe you're not in the right job, maybe you're not running the right business, maybe you hate your clients, maybe you're in a organization that's going through massive change. And I think people who work in change management probably see a good chunk of people that they're that maybe a consultant for a company, and they're seeing employees just get fried, those types of things. So I think it's important to understand the whole host of reasons somebody could burn out.
Yeah, I tend to lean on the individual as the one primary responsible for the burnout. That's not to say that the organization doesn't play a role, because there are plenty of organizations that are poorly run by the wrong people, who make decisions in a vacuum that obviously contribute to the stress and burnout of everybody. But at the end of the day, I'd love to see every individual say, I have a say in this. I can leave if I want to. I can speak up if
Mhm.
I want to. And yes, you might lose your job. And yes, you might have to go somewhere else and find a job. But I'd rather you do that than to sit in a place of helplessness. But in terms of, you had mentioned something else about the idea of not knowing where you're going, or being unclear. And there's some sort of strategy around breaking, say, a prisoner of war when there's a hostage situation. Those holding the hostages, or the prisoners of war, what they're trying to do is break their minds. And oftentimes you can break somebody. The number one way to break a human being is to put them in a state of unknown. I
Yeah.
don't, like, if I don't know when I'm going to get out, or I don't know when you're going to stop beating me, or I don't know when I'm going to eat again or sleep again, you start to go cuckoo. And
Hmm.
I think that when you talk about a company, there are companies that are mindlessly running every day, not intentionally, but they don't take enough time to tell the employee where they're going. This is what we are doing here. This is the reason our company exists. And
Yeah.
this is how you play a role in this game we're playing. And then having conversations about that. Instead, they task the employee with whatever, you got to do this or you got to do that, but they don't connect it to anything. And then if they start mistreating them, or not acknowledging them, or not saying thank you, or making decisions, I know I told you this yesterday, but today we're changing direction. We're doing this today. Put that down. I don't think the average manager in the average company understands the impact of lack of clarity and then change of direction on people. And then if the person themselves, if the individual themselves doesn't understand the impact of that, they'll start resenting the company, the boss. They'll start going silent. I'm not going to say anything. I hate this job. I got to go look for another job. And they'll go find the same crap somewhere else. Comment on that.
I think there's a couple things. You're right. I think I have, I ran a PR firm for many years. I still have a couple clients that I work with now, but in the past, I've seen dumpster fires of the way these companies are run. I've seen mergers where people have left in droves because there was a you know complete dumpster fire. There was miscommunication. You're right. There was lack of clarity, lack of direction. They were trying to do too many things, those types of things. So there's that part of it. There are many occasions where maybe the person sitting in the cubicle is not going to make any impact on what's going on in the C-suite. So people need to make that decision. But you're right. And I'm a firm believer that we are, and you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and it's a phrase in my book, we're co-founders of our burnout. So you do, unless you will be financially devastated, you do have the option to go find another job. You have the option, if you're an entrepreneur, to maybe say, you know what, this isn't the business I want to run anymore. I don't like this business anymore. I can start to figure out what I want to do next. You have that option. Getting down into the the desk level in the cubicle, if you're not managing your time properly, if you're not controlling your schedule during the week, if you're constantly procrastinating, those types of things, that's not your company's fault. That's your fault, and you're burning yourself out. And as you just mentioned, okay, this job isn't working for me anymore. I'm going to go to another job. Well, if you don't manage your schedule, don't manage your time, and continue to procrastinate, guess what's going to happen at the next job?
Yeah.
You're going to burn out again. So you can't bring the same habits to a new environment and expect different results. Also, in the case of, as we mentioned, caregivers, yeah, your mother or father hits that alarm at 2 a.m. and calls the fire department, and your phone rings and wakes you up. That stuff's going to happen, but to the best of your ability, you need to be in control. I mean, that could be, quite frankly, the gist of this conversation is that if you are burned out, if you are feeling burned out, then you need to do what it takes to be in control. Talk to somebody, go to the gym, decide whether you want to work there anymore, have a conversation with yourself and see, what am I doing wrong? What am I complaining about? What can I fix?
Yeah. I've had some experiences over the last few years where, there are people that might not necessarily have control over their life. And when somebody in your life doesn't have control over their life, and I don't want to include somebody who's sick or incapacitated. I don't want to do that, because a parent, an older person, somebody who, might have been in an accident, somebody who was born with a condition, those are things that, hey, it's on us to take care of those people. We owe it to those people to be there for them, but we first owe it to them to take care of ourselves, so that we're there with the right energy and strength and mind and all that stuff. But there are times where we surround ourselves with people, or people come into our lives, whether, sometimes by no choice, and they are not in control of the decisions they're making. And if we're not careful, we're at the mercy of their bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are times where you have to say no to people who make poor decisions, or who are constantly on the wrong track. How often do you find that people are burnt out because they're at the mercy of the lack of control by the people in their lives?
I've worked with many people who finally made the decision that they're gonna go find a new job. They couldn't make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, call it burning the boats, call it whatever you want to call it, but they tried, they didn't get anywhere. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they tried to have a conversation with their boss.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go well. Now, I advise people there's a difference between assertive and aggressive. You can go into your boss and say, you know what, I really want to discuss X, Y, and Z. You don't have to go in there with guns blazing.
Mhm.
You can kind of test the water, so to speak. But if you're not getting anywhere and you don't see any uh, possible positive change on the horizon,
Mhm.
then that's a decision you need to make. So,
Okay, what about outside of work? You had mentioned earlier, we're bringing, there's a whole component outside of work that we're all bringing inside of work. If what's going on outside of work is not managed, then what you're bringing inside of work is not going to be managed. If you have dysfunction in your home, if you have dysfunction in your relationships and you don't get that under control, and you're trying to say pay the bills by going to a job that you hate and work with a boss that you think is an a-hole,
yeah.
and you're not managing what's going on at home, you follow what I'm saying? So it's like to what extent do we have to take responsibility for the decisions we make outside of work so that we're not putting it on the people inside of work?
I would say one of the best things you can do is to find a coach or a mentor that you can bounce some ideas off of. You're right. Maybe things aren't going well at home. Maybe you can't talk to a family member. Um, you can't talk to your boss. You're in this situation. Maybe you need a safe space to kind of work things out. So it's a good idea to find somebody to talk to. Like I said, it could be a coach, it could be a mentor. If you really feel that things aren't going well, then yeah, maybe you need more professional help, like a therapist. And a lot of people are burned out, have to just go sit down and work their stuff out. That's important. Like I said, I'm I'm the furthest thing from a therapist. I'm a welding school flunk out. So, but I work more on the just the getting down to the street smart
Yeah.
pieces that need to be fixed or moved around or addressed. But um, if something happened to you when you were 12 years old and it's still bothering you, then I'm not equipped to do that. That you need some professional help. So I mean that's another avenue that some people there are people that I interviewed for the book that did have to go through therapy,
Sure.
so there were some things they needed to unpack. So,
Well, over the last 3 years, I've coached many people over the years, and it's all business related coaching. The pandemic changed a lot of that, though. What was
mm,
once just a business conversation became a much different conversation with
yeah,
many people. But some of the folks that I've coached over the years, they have and are going through therapy, and they've shared that with me. No specifics, no names, obviously here, but oftentimes I'd be talking to somebody and say, my therapist told me the same thing. I'm like, what? Like
mm,
what? I had no idea at the time that we were talking about the same business conversation was the same as the conversation with the therapist. That being said, I know that the accessing therapy has been very challenging over the
mm.
last few years. So even if you do, sometimes these folks have to wait, 6 months, 9 months just to get a therapist. And who's to say that person is even going to connect with them, or who's to say that they're even going to feel comfortable with that individual? So maybe in the short term, somebody outside, whether maybe it's a friend or a community member or somebody in your whatever, whatever, could be a coach, could be a priest or a rabbi. Maybe there's somebody else in your life you can talk to. I want to go back to the work thing, though. You and I are in the same, I'd say, 10-year age bracket. We're both between 25 and 35. I'm assuming you're in the no, but here's the deal. I'm 52, and I know a lot of people in that 45 to 60 bracket at a point in their careers where a lot of them are doing well. Financially, they're doing well. Job title, they're doing well. On paper, they look good. But I've noticed over the last couple of years, there are mid-career changes that have happened to people they didn't expect to happen. Maybe their companies were acquired or they merged with another organization. They have a new boss, and whatever they thought felt good doesn't feel good anymore. And a lot of them are trapped by their money. I've had people cry to me who are making $500,000, literally $500,000, crying about how unhappy they are at work because they don't like the way they're treated, say, by the organization, but they won't leave because they're completely, in quotes, trapped by the money. They don't believe enough in themselves to walk away from the money. So they'd rather be punished or abused, conceptually, by staying in exchange for the money. And then I've seen other people that have been laid off and they can't replace the money because what they were being paid before is not necessarily what they're worth to somebody else. And there are a lot of people in our age bracket who have lost confidence in themselves. They don't know what it's like to look for work because they haven't looked for years. They don't know what it's like they don't know how to apply for a job. They haven't put a resume together since like 1981. I'm exaggerating, obviously, and they don't know where to begin. So I think to some extent, burnout is a problem in our, for folks in our age bracket. And I think it's dangerous. I've talked to many people over the last couple of years who are trying to now replace their job with, how do I replace my income? How do I maintain that title? How do I show my neighbors that I can still afford to live in this neighborhood? And I'm afraid for a lot of them because they're trying to replace whatever they think they lost with a job and a title and money. And I do think many of them are at risk of the same, to your point earlier, the same damn thing happening again. And then what is their mental state?
I think we're living in a time where industry is changing extremely rapidly. I use the example of my PR firm. When I went out on my own, we didn't have social media. We didn't, we could do email newsletters, obviously websites, stuff like that, but social media didn't exist. I was I ran public relations at Special Olympics and I was always around TV cameras. So when I went out on my own, I could very easily, because of the connections I had, and I'm not patting myself on the back, this is the way it is. I knew a lot of these people in the TV industry. I could pick up the phone and I could say, hey, I got CEO of XYZ company. He can come in the studio and he can, talk about this business thing or, this, that, or the other thing. So, and then somebody invented social media and it completely changed the dynamic of the PR industry. In the beginning, it was great because nobody knew how to use this stuff. So we were putting people on TV. We were trying to figure out, these platforms of, social media. But over time, the digital aspect was eating into the traditional media relations, putting people on TV, newspapers, that type of stuff. It was also eating into the revenue model of TV stations and newspapers. So you can see where things were changing drastically. And I like to say my PR firm ended up being something that I never signed up for. I didn't like being the social media guy. I was a guy who could build relationships with a TV producer or things like that. So I would say that contributed significantly to the way I felt because I was now in a business that I did not like. And I think even if you're working for yourself or you're in an organization that is following a similar path, the organization you went to work for 20 years ago is probably not the one you're working for today. Some people are really good at change, read Who Moved My Cheese or whatever, where, all right, just adapt, but some people don't want to,
Sure.
Some people don't, just change. I don't want to change. It's not what I like, and for a person with ADHD, that is much more critical because when we don't like something, we ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
So, so that brings another dynamic into the equation. So yeah, I can see where I can make a massive case for being in an environment that you just do not enjoy anymore and you dread getting up and going to work in the morning, but you're also tied to the money.
Yeah. And the couple of jobs I've moved on from over the years, one, I made really, really, really good money as a younger person. And if you looked at it on paper, you'd say, why would you choose to walk away from that for this? It didn't make any sense, but mentally, I wasn't satisfied. So I looked at it and said, well, if I just hold on to the money, I know what it feels like every day to go home and not feel good just because the money wasn't worth it to me. And there's just something liberating about walking away from money and it's not easy to do, and I'm not saying everyone can or should do it, but when you can, you're completely empowered. Now you're totally empowered. That's not it's not a factor in your decision. But in order to do that, you've got to be responsible with it. You've got to save it or invest it or not overspend it and all those other things in order to make those decisions possible.
Well, yeah, I owned a restaurant just outside of Boston. I made really good money, but I just could not see me doing this long term. It was exhausting. It was physically exhausting. It was, medically, it's a punishing industry to go in day after day is running a restaurant. And I got rid of it. And that's when I went to work for Special Olympics. And I love Special Olympics, but when I first got there, I wasn't making very good money at all. I was used to making a lot more money. I had to make that change because I was going to die on the dish room floor if I didn't make a change,
Yeah. Well, and you realize that you could. I will say this, if I didn't podcast with you, whenever that was, I should know that. I should have looked that up before we started. I didn't really understand what a podcast was. And then I don't even really understand how we connected, and I forget that whole dynamic. Mm-hmm. But at the time when you were doing the interview with me, I'm like, how did this guy do this? Like, how did he create this studio? And then my wife encouraged me to start this in 2019. And in my mind, I had to have an office and a studio and equipment and producers and lighting. And obviously I don't have any of those things. And, but if it wasn't for you actually doing it and me watching you do it in the interview, I don't know that I would have done it. So it's just funny how you learn to adapt and take control and, transition from, say, being a PR guy in a company to kind of reinventing yourself. But through that, it sparked a thought in my mind that took me a couple more years to even start this. But you were one of the people I called early on, like, what do I need? Like, do I have to buy a microphone? You probably don't even remember. But I did ask you, like, what do you do with this stuff? Do you upload it to something? And how do you do that? I don't know what the hell I was doing. But my point is I had to learn to adapt and evolve if I wanted this to become something. And quite frankly, it's nothing more than a hobby, but it's allowed me to continue to evolve. And I'm sure it's done the same for you. What haven't I asked you? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover? Because I know I have a bad habit of getting everybody off track.
I think that just the general theme is if, people are listening and they're feeling burned out and they're pulling the covers over the head every day, then we talked about it, but it is not going to get any better unless you decide to take control, and you need to develop that mindset. It's so cliche, nobody's coming to save you, but nobody is. You need to take control. You need to address the things that are causing you to burn out. You need to find a way to fix those. You need to work with somebody. I put a number of things right at the, I profiled 16 people in the book who went through very difficult experiences of burnout. But I also, right at the beginning of the book, because I knew people needed something right away, is to just, I put a number of things that they can do right now. And one of the things was just go book a weekend away. So if you're feeling burned out and you can financially do it, just go book a hotel room like an hour and a half away, just far enough away from the house where you can't, come home. Just sit there, chill out, bring a notepad, go down to the hotel bar and, have a steak and a beer and just chill out and relax, and, write some notes. What's going on? Take a walk, go take a 30-minute walk, join that gym, talk to somebody, sit in quiet room for 30 minutes, but it's just time for you to kind of figure out what's going on. What are the challenges? What are the frustrations? And one of the big things that I think is not addressed enough is what are the things that you repeatedly complain about? Because if you're complaining about the same thing over and over and over again, those are the things you need to fix. Okay. I did this with clients who weren't paying me when I was running my PR firm, where I had these clients on retainers, and they would go out 60, sometimes 90 days, and I was too much of a people pleaser. It's like, oh, Dave, sorry, we forgot. Oh, that's okay. That's what I would say. Well, it wasn't okay, because customers not paying me was burning me out. And I was complaining about the same client over and over again every night. And my wife finally was sitting there having a beer one night, watching crap on TV or something. And she goes, would you just shut up and fix it? And I'm like, you're right. I need to put my foot down with this client. You can't pay me 90 days out. My point in all that is that you really need to address the things you're complaining about, because those are the things that are burning you out.
You're tapping into my LinkedIn post this morning, which I haven't submitted yet, but it's all about that whole Aristotle concept of we are what we repeatedly do. And if you repeatedly complain, be aware of it. I want you to have the last word, but you sparked my thought here. In the work I do with my clients, and the coaching work specifically, it's recognizing, and helping people recognize what they're not saying to themselves or to other people. So often the issues that we have are as a result of us not speaking up and not saying, no, that's it. I'm done with that. I'm done with you, or I'm done saying this. But until you become aware of those repeated habits, you're at the mercy of them.
I'll leave you with this. This is what we talked about earlier about, co-founding your burnout. We train people how to treat us. So if we continue to do these things, for example, let my client go out 90 days on a retainer fee, guess what? They're going to do it again, and they're going to do it again, and they're going to do it again. So if people are listening and they want some parting advice, figure out what you're doing to train people that are treating you the way you don't want to be treated.
Dave Greenwood, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
You too.